Hello, and welcome to the Find Creative Expression podcast, conversations about art and creativity. I'm your host, Sara Crawford, author, playwright, musician, basically obsessed with art. You can find more information at findcreativeexpression.com. Let's get rolling. Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 24 of the Find Creative Expression podcast. Coming up, I have an interview with playwright, actor, director, screenwriter, and founder of Essential Theater, Peter Hardy. As you can tell, Peter has a seriously impressive resume, and he's an incredibly creative and prolific artist, so I'm really excited to talk to him. So you may have noticed that I have a new intro. The music in that, and then the little, bells music that I was using for the intro, both of those are from the Pocket the Moon album. Pocket the Moon was a band that I was in with one other person, Jeff Goodwin. And the reason I bring it up is that this month, the Pocket the Moon album is officially 10 years old. So much stuff has happened in my life since then that it literally feels like a different person. Like when I hear those songs, it feels like someone else wrote them. And, when I play them, it feels like I'm playing a cover. But that album is still one of my proudest artistic accomplishments. If you haven't heard it, it's streaming on Bandcamp and Spotify and I think YouTube. I will link to it on the website, findcreativeexpression.com, if you want to check it out. As far as what's going on with me, I've mainly just been adjusting to my new day job with AT&T recently, and it's been going pretty well. I've actually kept up going to the gym. I've been working on my hashtag Own Voices novel. That's what I'm going to call it now because, I was calling it the Untitled Ataxia novel, but I really don't think a lot of people know what ataxia is. It's weird because it's a genetic degenerative thing, so I don't really think of myself as being disabled right now, but my balance really sucks, and I stumble around a lot, and people think I'm drunk, like, all the time. Which used to kind of embarrass me, but now I'm kind of just like, whatever. Like, I don't really care. So it's weird for me to say that I'm working on a hashtag Own Voices novel because I'm not a person of color or, in the LGBTQ community. But I think disabled stories are also stories that need to be told. Even if it's not a very common disability or it's one that gets worse with time. So I'm still working on my play about the meditation retreat. So probably over the next at least 3 or 4 months, I won't have much of an update with that, except, I'm still working on my novel and my play. In other news, so Candice Robinson, who I interviewed in the last episode, convinced me to start a TikTok. So I kind of thought it was just going to be 16-year-olds dancing, but actually there's a lot of fun stuff on TikTok. There's like a lot of funny cat videos. There are a lot of cool authors and book lovers making videos about writing and books. There's people talking about music, and there's really just some funny stuff on there. I will say it's made my attention span way shorter because you just scroll through and each video is a minute or less. And if you hit the back button, it plays another video. You have to hit the back button twice to even get out of the app. So, I gotta say, ever since I decided that it was just okay for me to have a day job and I gave up on the idea of being an indie author, I really don't obsess over likes and followers and shares and interactions with my content. When you're really trying to sell books, it's all about, I gotta build a following and I gotta post on Instagram and I gotta post on Twitter and I gotta post this and I gotta post that. And then, you know, when your content doesn't go as far as you think it should, you get really discouraged. But now I really don't care. I just create content when I want to for the platforms I want. And if people want to interact with it, that's great. But if they don't, that's fine too. So as far as recommendations go, I just finished listening to Brandi Carlile's memoir, Broken Horses, on audiobook, and it was really good. You know, I'd never really heard much of her music before except, you know, The Story, which is the song that everyone knows. But I saw my friend Brian Perry post about the book, and he gave it such a glowing recommendation that I had to check it out. And I'm really glad that I did. The audiobook was especially cool because at the end of every chapter, she plays a song. And it's usually like a song that she's been talking about in the chapter. So it kind of reminded me of VH1 storytellers. Remember when they used to do that? And the artist would tell a story about the song before they played it. Anyway, so I really enjoyed that. And I have been listening to her latest album, which is called By the Way I Forgive You, since I finished the book. And, you know, I'm really enjoying it. I'm also super into this book I'm reading on ebook called Spirit Legacy by E. Holmes. It's kind of hard to say. E. It's a young adult paranormal book, but it's really more of a ghost story, and it seems to be really refreshing and not predictable. You know, it's rare these days that I will read book one in a trilogy and continue on with it with the other two books. But I definitely plan to continue on with this one. And I'm still obsessing over Blue Weekend, the album by Wolf Alice. So it's so good, you guys. If you haven't heard it, you should definitely check it out. All right, that's enough of my yammering. Let's go ahead and get into the interview. Hey everyone, I am here with Peter Hardy. Peter Hardy has been working as an actor, director, and writer based in Atlanta for over 30 years. His play Mysterious Connections was chosen for development at the Eugene O'Neill Center's National Playwrights Conference, and he has won playwriting awards from the Festival of Southern Theater at Rise Magazine and the New Southern Theater Festival. He has had several short stories published and is the founding artistic director of The Essential Theater, a company dedicated to supporting and producing new works by Georgia playwrights. Welcome, Peter.
Guilty on all counts.
Yeah, no, I mean, you have such a impressive resume. It's crazy. Like, you've just done so much stuff. I love it.
Well, I'll just I'll give a hint to those. The key to the secret to gathering an impressive resume is to get older, because then if you just sort of keep doing things, then it begins to say, "Wow, he's done a lot."
Yeah, I guess that's true. Time. So how did you get into theater and playwriting?
Well, I grew up with theater. My parents are both theater people. They taught in university theater and worked professionally. My father, mostly as a director and actor. He was also a published novelist. And my mother, as an actress and a producer, she ran a theater company in North Carolina for a number of years back in the 1970s. Cool. And my sisters had novels and short stories published. So that's pretty much what I grew up with.
Cool. And so it was very much in the family.
Yes, and actually the way I rebelled against my family was to stop doing theater for a while. In my first few years in college, I didn't do any theater, and I became an English major and then a history major, and I was just trying to do other things, and I eventually realized that I wasn't good at anything else. So I went
did you start out as an actor and then direct and then write, or did you start out as a writer, or did you start out as kind of all three?
Well, when I was, a teenager, I acted. I did that in high school and some in other, professional or semi-professional circumstances. And then once I got back into it in college, although I was interested in directing early on, I did a little bit of directing, but it took a little while for that to happen. And I did a little bit of playwriting, but that it took a while for that to develop. I had written short stories when I was younger, and I started writing plays later. But so that they all sort of came along, they all fed on each other,
Right.
but there were just more opportunities just to act.
Right. So how has your experience as an actor and a director helped your writing, or vice versa?
Well, very much so. Of course, all creative work, sort of your life, everything feeds off everything else in your life. But
Right.
I found that particularly with playwriting, probably I learned more about playwriting from an acting class I took when I was in grad school, or
Mhm.
directing for that matter. I had a very good acting teacher named Manuel Duque at Penn State University. And it was a great class. I didn't do particularly well in the class. I remember feeling like before the year was over, everybody had a big breakthrough except for me.
Oh.
Um, but I continued to learn from it, even long after I was no longer in the class. And but basically, as a playwright, when I'm writing something, I kind of feel everything out as an actor. If I can't find a sort of a through line and a connection of energy and purpose
Mhm.
in what I'm writing would work for me as an actor, then I'm pretty sure that it's not. I need to find something else from a writing point of view.
Right.
So those kind of instincts that I developed as an actor apply to playwriting. I think I'm a better writer than I'm an actor, but there's that kind of just feeling your way through a role and feeling one moment to connect to the other. And if I can't feel that on an acting point of view, then something's wrong with the writing.
Yeah, I think it's just about like storytelling, and when you explore one aspect of storytelling like acting, it kind of shapes how you can tell stories in
Hmm.
other aspects.
Yeah. But I guess one thing with like acting as opposed to writing, storytelling, storytelling is certainly what you're doing, but storytelling can be kind of abstract and removed.
Mhm.
But if you're within a story or trying to live within a story as an actor, it's not abstract.
Right.
It's got to be, you got to be connected to each moment on a visceral level. And so trying to keep that in mind when you're writing something, I find is helpful. Otherwise, it kind of becomes an idea that you're constructing.
Right, right. So, okay, you've written quite a few screenplays, and I'm just going to read a few here. Okay, so you have Veil, which was the winner of the Best Short Mystery Script at the Silk Road Film Awards. Site Specific, which won Best Short Horror Screenplay at the Southern Horror Film Festival, and Turn Paper, which won Best Short Screenplay at Bridge Fest. Now that's just like naming a few. And the amount of awards and selections that your screenplays have is amazing. And I mean, if I were to read all of them, that would probably just take up the whole interview. So I wanted to ask you a few questions about your screenwriting. So how did you get into screenwriting?
Well, okay, this is a bit of a story, and I'll try not to have it be too long. But I've always loved movies. I was interested in films like as early as when I was 12, 13. And of course I was oriented to theater just because my parents worked in it. But when I was young, and I'm talking about like the 1970s and 1980s because I'm that old, the filmmaking equipment and technology was much more inaccessible to the average person. It was much more expensive. It was more cumbersome. And so in fact, like in the early 1980s, I wrote my first short screenplay which is a little ghost story called Term Paper. And it was a fairly simple story. And I knew someone who had access to a videotape equipment, a video camera and videotape editing equipment. And so I got a couple of friends together and we shot it in someone's apartment in the course of one day, and then spent weeks editing it together.
Right.
And this was, like, say, a very cumbersome process back then. And it was rough, but I was pleased with the results. And then about a year later, this was on a video cassette. That's what I had it on. And I managed to erase it. And the fellow I had made it with, I didn't know how to get a hold of him anymore. So it was lost.
Oh, no.
And it wasn't because of that I decided to, but I never tried to write for film again. I just felt like, well, if I wrote a screenplay, what would I do with it? I don't know anyone who could make it. I don't want to move to Los Angeles and try to become a screenwriter for the movies. So I concentrated on theater, which was more accessible to me. And it was like, well, if I write a play, I can always put it on myself, which I've done on various occasions.
Right.
And so decades went by and people would say, why do you write screenplay? And I'd go, no. And then I finally started thinking, well, all right, maybe I'll give that a try. And so a few years ago, I started working on a feature-length screenplay that was kind of a Hitchcock-inspired mystery called Nocturnal. And I worked on that for a few years while I was working also on a play. And then I found myself getting a couple of ideas for short screenplays. And I decided, one of them was Veil, and I decided to go ahead and write those out. And I bought a book which tells you what the screenwriting format is. Some people get software equipment to do that, but I just bought a book which was cheaper and figured it out. And I liked it. But I said, well, I don't know what I'm going to do with these. And a friend of mine, Yolanda Asher, who's an actress, said, oh, well, you can submit screenplays to film festivals. And I said, well, you can just submit a screenplay? And she said, yeah. And so I found out, and there's a program called Film Freeway, which you subscribe to. But it will tell you all the film festivals there are that you can submit to and what the details about them are. And it seems like thousands of these film festivals around the world, and they all cost money to submit to. Some are more expensive than others, and I stuck to the ones that were less expensive. And so I ended up with 6 short screenplays, including Term Paper, which I rewrote. I recreated it. So I had 6 short screenplays that I started submitting to festivals. Oh, also, side note, after I had rewritten Term Paper 40 years after I lost the original version of it, I came across the guy I had made it with on Facebook. I sent him a message, said, by any chance, do you remember? His name was Lev Sherman. By any chance, do you remember this? Do you have a copy of it possibly? And he said, I think I do. And a few days later, he sent me a link to my lost film, which I had not seen in 40 years.
Wow.
Which felt very symbolic to me.
How much different was it from the new version that you rewrote?
Well, it wasn't that different, but I was pleased to see that in recreating it from memory, I think I had improved it. I just tightened it up.
Right.
So, and the original videotape film was very rough. It's not something I would like show people with a whole lot of, wow, look at this, isn't this great? But it was a first effort, and I was very glad to have it back again, and having it kind of returned to me after 40 years of saying of it being lost and not writing it for the screen at all. And I'm now writing for screen again, and this film returns to me. All felt kind of magical and symbolic to me. So
yeah.
And so I, with the film festivals that I submit screenplays, I've gotten a lot of response there. They either select them. They don't always select them, but you're selected for the festival, and then maybe you get a nomination or a finalist designation or an award. And I've gotten a lot of those, as you pointed out, and it's very nice and very encouraging. But they don't give you any money, and no one so far has said, "Oh, we want to make this into a film." So it's kind of like getting a really nice recommendation.
Right.
But with short films, and I've been sort of trying to find if I could find anybody who was like looking for screenplays to make short films out of, and I haven't had any luck with that. And so I'm now thinking about, because the filmmaking equipment is much more accessible now and much less expensive, that I'm gonna try and see about getting some equipment and making my own films, which is going to be a whole new learning thing, you know.
Oh, that's really cool.
Well, I'm kind of daunted by it, but I'm also excited by it. So we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of kind of indie filmmakers in Atlanta doing interesting things. So
Yeah.
yeah, I definitely would be interested to see, your film.
Well, I think, and what happens is that, from what I understand, if you make a short film, it still costs you some money. I mean, I have yet to find out just how much it can cost, but it still costs some money, and chances are you're not going to make any money from it.
Right.
So most people who are making short films are making their own films. They're not looking for someone else to write something for them. At least that's kind of the impression I've been getting.
Right.
So it's something you do more for the artistic, satisfaction and interest, and maybe it'll lead you to something else, but it's an investment. It's something you have to be willing to put some time and expense into, just for the artistic joy of it.
Yeah, totally. So when you have a new idea, like, how do you decide if it would be better as a play or a screenplay?
Well, I don't have a firm answer for that. It kind of comes down to what it feels like as an idea develops. Does it feel like a film? Does the idea of making it as a film interest me, or does the idea of doing it as a play or a short story or something interest me more? And it's, it has to do with time. I mean, if you have like long scenes full of dialogue, that's probably more of a play than a film,
right?
But not necessarily, And if you have lots and lots of short little scenes that take place in a bunch of different locations, that's probably more like a film than a play, but not necessarily. And I've always been interested in plays that have cinematic qualities to them, or movies that have theatrical qualities to them.
Right.
And I think those are real interesting mixes. So as I say, there's no hard and fast rules, but if you're working on a story, I mean, just for people of whatever is an advice or whatever to anybody, kind of comes down to what you feel like, what you find yourself wanting it to be.
Right. So have you ever started a play or a short story or a screenplay even, and then realized a few pages in that you should actually be writing it as, in a different medium?
Well, maybe not that, but there are ideas that I've never really gotten but so far with, and I keep not being able to decide what they should be. But they also are they seem kind of stalled anyway. I mean, I have a few things like that. I think if the stories started unfolding before me in my mind more, probably what medium they should be in would probably become clearer.
Right.
But it's like I say, yeah, I don't think that's I don't think I've had to switch horses in midstream or whatever.
Right. So I've noticed a lot of your work tends to deal with, discovering the unseen or peeling back layers to reveal the truth. You have a lot of mysterious characters who turn out to be different than, you'd expect as the story unfolds. So what is it that draws you to these types of characters and stories?
Well, I thought about that because I saw these questions earlier, and there's a short answer and a longer answer. The short answer is that I guess I'm just kind of naturally drawn to intriguing and mysterious and sort of spooky ideas and material, and I guess I find life kind of spooky and mysterious. And as I get older, I'm more comfortable with that. It doesn't distress me. I'm just sort of intrigued by it. But I think that the longer version is that I think a lot of plays in particular, a lot of what almost any play is about is the revelation of character, I think.
Right.
Plays don't tend to have plots so much as maybe a movie or a novel does. I mean, they can, but they tend to be more about, we see more of these characters, or we think we know who this character is, and then we find out that they're different than we thought. That's the way a lot of plays work.
Right.
And there's elements of that, and can be elements of that certainly in a novel or in a movie. But a movie can be, just like people running and jumping and chasing and fighting, and and occasionally having a conversation.
Yeah.
But a play is much more likely going to be about finding out about people, and I think one of the reasons that that's so prevalent in storytelling, particularly on the stage, but in other mediums as well, is that and actually, I mean, the most recent full-length play that I finished, which I finished about a year ago, called The Other Part of the Picture, a lot of that, what that play is about, is this idea, which is that in life, we find out a certain number of things about other people, or about a place, or a town, or
Right.
anything. But we only get so much information, just because there's only so much that you can know.
Yeah.
And we take the information that is given to us, which is sort of like the exposition that a writer decides to give a reader.
Mhm.
We take the information that is given us and we kind of come up with a story about it. And that's what we call understanding something, is making up a story about it.
Right.
I mean, I, met you a number of years ago. You were a playwright. My company did a reading of one of your plays. I saw you perform as a singer-songwriter. I bought your CD, which is a nice CD. I recommend it to people.
Thank you.
And we've talked a few times and had communications on Facebook. And so there's a certain number of things that I know about you, but I only know so much, but I sort of have a story in my head about who Sara Crawford is,
Mhm.
and other people may have a very different story.
Well,
Uh,
yeah, and then
uh,
it's interesting if you think about, social media and
yeah, yeah,
the stories that, we all put together, but we're only seeing like the highlights of,
yeah.
people's lives. So,
A few brush strokes.
yeah, it's definitely interesting.
And so so one of the reasons that I think storytelling and the consumption of stories is such an important part of who we are as human beings, because it's kind of a crystallization or a formalized version of the process that we all use to engage with the world. We
Right.
take stuff in and we make up stories about what we take in. And so when you're writing a play or whatever, that's kind of what you're doing. And so I found that I tend to write about that, just that, how that happens. And like, that there's someone we say, who is that person? They're kind of mysterious. And
Mhm.
then we find out more, or we think, oh, they're kind of ordinary, but then we find out, wow, they're really a lot more mysterious than I thought they were. And I kind of think that's what life is like.
Yeah, yeah. I think we only really understand things through stories.
Yeah.
So the Essential Theater has had an annual play festival featuring the work of Georgia playwrights since 1999. So you have really done a lot when it comes to bringing work by Georgia playwrights to the Atlanta theater community, which I think everyone at Atlanta theater really appreciates. So, what was the experience of starting the Essential Theater like?
Well, it was kind of, I somewhat stumbled into it. I mean, I came to Atlanta. I moved here in 1986. I got some acting jobs pretty early on, and I wanted to direct my own projects. Um, and so I would occasionally, I mean, right, like within a year of having moved here, I put together the very first Essential Theater production, which was just a couple of one acts that we did for a weekend, somewhere. And then I would occasionally get people together and do another production here and there. And it was like maybe after 12 years of that, that I got the idea of doing a festival, which was really, I did that in order to have it make more of an impact and get more attention than doing a single production. Because when you do a single production of a play by a company that no one's really heard of, and you're performing in a different space every time,
Yeah.
it's very easy for that production to just kind of fall through the cracks and doesn't get reviewed. Hardly anyone hears about it. And, but I said, well, if we do, and I tended to be interested in plays that were not very well known. They may have been published plays, but they weren't the plays that everyone else was doing.
Mhm.
And so I got the idea that, well, if instead of doing one play that no one's heard of. Let's do 3 plays that no one's heard of. And maybe that'll just like draw more attention to us. And that worked. That first year, 1999, we did 3 plays that were not well known, and they got we got a feature article about us in Creative Loafing.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that first festival, and so we would do 3 plays in repertory. I got the idea of, well, and one of the plays will be by a Georgia writer, by a local writer. And I did that, because I'm a playwright myself, and I wanted to, support local writers, but it was also it was frankly a somewhat calculated move on my part. I said, well, this will just give us some local interest,
Mm-hmm.
some home team support, I mean, if you produce a play by a playwright, if nothing else, their friends and family will come,
Right.
And so and after a couple of years of doing that, we started the Essential Theater Playwriting Award, which is a competition, which is still all these years later, the only playwriting competition of its kind that is only for Georgia playwrights, and the winning writer or writers gets cash prize and a full production. And like from their very first year, we had a cash prize and a full production.
Mm-hmm.
And our very first contest winner was an 18-year-old young woman named Lauren Gunderson, who's now the most produced playwright in America.
Oh, wow.
So for quite a number of years, we did 3 plays in repertory, and one of them, sometimes 2, but one of them was always a play by a Georgia writer. And as time went by, the new Georgia plays were more and more what we were getting to be known for. I mean, there were people who thought that's all we did, even when that wasn't the case.
Right.
We also began to just get more submissions, and more strong submissions, than we had in the early days. One thing, I think, because we were just getting to be better known, and more writers were hearing about us and were willing to trust us with their material.
Right.
But also, I think the playwriting scene was just getting stronger, which was fostered and encouraged by groups like Working Title Playwrights, the Atlanta Playwriting Organization.
Mm-hmm.
There was just, more good plays were emerging. And so in 2012, I guess, we decided we would now do all new plays by Georgia writers. And after a couple of years, we switched from doing 3 plays in repertory to doing 2 plays in repertory for the festival, simply because doing 3 plays in repertory just drove everybody crazy, and and meant we had fewer resources to spread around.
Right.
So the thing of doing new Georgia writers, and like I say, it was what we were known for. It's what we got a lot of credit for. I think it helped us get financial support from granting organizations, but it also became our mission. So it wasn't something that I set out to do, but Maya Angelou says you find your path by walking it, and I kind of feel as though that's what we did.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And I'm now, real proud of that. And also, when you're doing, because we're not producing year round, and we're just doing a festival. So now we're basically, of the plays that are submitted to us, and we typically receive between like 60 and 100 submissions. It varies from year to year. But we choose 2 plays to give full productions to. Mm-hmm. And we just try to find what we think are the best plays. And in a way, that means that we don't have to think, okay, what does our audience want to see? What kinds of plays do we want to present? Or what kind of statement are we trying to make? Or we kind of let the writers lead us.
Right.
It's like, this is what they're giving this, and this is what we judge to be the best plays. And of course, that's ultimately a subjective decision, but we try to go for quality rather than, this year we want to do a play that's about blank. Mm-hmm. Although, like, as I say, the writers lead us. So if there's something that's really important going on in the world, chances are there'll be a play about it.
Right.
And with any luck, there'll be a good play about it.
Mhm.
So that's how that has worked out for us, and
Yeah.
I'm pleased and grateful for how it's gone.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have done some really great works in the festival. So what have been some of the most like memorable productions in the festivals throughout the years?
I saw that question and I thought about it this afternoon, and I really can't do that. I mean, we've produced in the festival since the first year, we produced almost 60 plays.
Oh, wow.
And if I was going to choose the particular favorites of mine, I mean, just personally, there would probably be 20 to 25 of them. And then I was saying, well, gosh, he chose 20 to 25 plays and he didn't choose that one that I worked on. And so I just,
Yeah, yeah.
I, we've had many that are real favorites, both, world premieres and some of the plays that we've done by other writers that have already published and produced. Some of those were in our earlier years are still real favorites of mine, but we've produced one or two of my own plays, and anyway, we've done a lot of things that I feel very close to and very special about.
So do you have any updates about the 2021 festival?
2020 was the first year since 1999 that we did not produce a festival.
Mm-hmm.
For some reason, I can't remember why, but for some reason, no theater was happening that year. And we chose two plays for that festival we were making plans for, called The Outrage Machine by Daniel Carter Brown and The Wishing Place by Beverly Trader Austin. And we were not able to produce them. And I hope that one day we can, because they deserve to be. This year, we've been producing in the summer for years, which works well for us on a lot of levels, but 2 or 3 months ago we still weren't sure that it was really going to be a good idea to try and do live theater in August. So we said, well, why don't we aim for like October or November just for this year? And so it looks like we've settled in to perform in November. We're only going to be able to, the festival's only going to be able to run 3 weeks this year instead of our usual 5 weeks, just because of venue availability and everything. And because everything's been so uncertain, it's been so hard to make plans,
Yeah.
Although we're now feel reasonably confident that it'll be safe, and that people will feel comfortable coming out to see theater again. So we're going to be running I think opening in early November. We have 2 prize winners. We've been giving 2 prize winners for the last few years. We're doing one play called Calming the Man by Anthony Lamar White. That play was done, a workshop of that was done at the Alliance Theater's Riser Artist Lab a couple of years ago.
Oh, okay.
It's a play, it's about an African-American man and his 2 college-age sons. It's set in 1976, the year of the American bicentennial, and it's a very painful play. The father in the play is filled with hurt from just a lifetime of dealing with racism and loss and a lot of hardships, and each of his sons in their way is trying to find a way to escape from this cycle of their father's rage and bitterness. It's a very strong play. It's very powerful. It's very influenced, I would say, by August Wilson, but that's a pretty good model to be drawing on. And then the other play we're doing is called Raising the Dead by Aaron Considine. So we're doing Calming the Man and Raising the Dead. And Raising the Dead is also, in a way, about people trying to escape from pain. It's a very different play. It's about 2 women, women of a certain age, as they say, somewhere in like the 40s, 50s range in New Orleans. And they're both, in their different ways, feel kind of trapped in invisibility and solitariness. They feel like no one sees them, and they don't have any contact with anyone, and they're trying to find a way to connect with each other and find some way to escape from the pain that they feel. It's a much more hopeful play than Calming the Man is. Erin Considine, who wrote Raising the Dead, is having a good year. Another play of hers called Riding Bicycles in the Rain is getting its world premiere about a month or two before our production of her other play opens. It's being done at a theater in Wyoming. So we're very pleased for her for that.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So, I'm really excited to see both of those. I'm really excited to see any theater at this point, but
sure, yes,
both
we're hoping a lot
really
of people
good.
will feel that way. Yeah.
So what are you working on right now?
Well, I have a number of irons in the fire, but the main thing I'm working on now is a screenplay version of my play Sally and Glenn at the Palace, which Central Theater did about 10 years ago.
I love that one.
Thank you. You know, people said, "Oh, you should do a screenplay of that." And I was like, "No, it's a play. And a friend of mine, gave me one suggestion that kind of opened the door for me about how to do that. And so I'm hoping to have that finished, I don't know, in a month or two. And then I have other things that are, ideas that are brewing. I wrote a few scenes of what might be a new play the other night. It sort of came to me quickly. I don't know what that play's about yet. Mm-hmm. And I also, some years ago, I worked for a number of years on a novel, a supernatural thriller called Dreamland Drive-In, which I was very pleased with, but then I kind of put it aside because I was going to write something else. And it's been quite a few years since I put it aside, but I was about halfway through it. And I feel like I need to go back and finish that. Mm-hmm. Because I don't want the cliche of a half-finished novel,
right?
To add to my necklace of regrets.
Awesome. So what books or TV shows, movies, music, etc. are you really into right now?
Well, I bounce around a lot. I have a certain amount of attention deficit disorder, or as an astrologer once told me, I have no earth in my chart. So yeah, I'm usually reading a bunch of books at a time. I go from one to the other, and different things. But I started reading a biography of Mike Nichols, who was a director.
Right.
He was actually an improvisational comedy. He and a woman named Elaine May were a team, Mike Nichols, Elaine May, who kind of put improvisational comedy on the map. They were very successful in the 1950s and early 60s. And kind of all improvisational comedy has come from them, or was started with them. And then he left that and started directing for theater, and then he started directing for films. But he led a very interesting life. And I started reading his biography, and that made me go back, start watching the HBO adaptation of Angels in America, which he directed.
I love that. Didn't he direct The Graduate?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I just want to make sure I was thinking of the right person.
Yeah, and many other things. The movie of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, Silkwood, and Working Girl, and he directed many hit plays over decades. But just a really interesting fellow.
That sounds like an interesting read for sure.
And I usually watch the TCM program Noir Alley, which shows old film noirs mostly from the 1940s, and I read crime fiction from that era sometimes. But like I said, I bounce around to a lot of different things.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. I tend to do that too. Like, I feel like I'm always like listening to an audiobook and reading an ebook and reading a print book, like at the same time. And
I hardly ever binge watch a TV show. I watch an episode and it's like, okay, that's enough of that for today. I'll watch something else now.
Yeah, I definitely have binged my share of shows, especially over the past year. But, I think we all have.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have kind of a big question, and you kind of touched on this earlier, but, I ask everyone this on the podcast. So why do you think art is important?
Well, as I, said earlier, I think at least storytelling is, as I said, I think, comes out of the way that we engage with the world. So I talked about that a bit, but I guess, Because I'm inclined to the arts, I think it's important because I'm interested in it and I enjoy it. I don't know, it's hard for me to say why it's important for everyone. Maybe it is or isn't as important for other people. But I draw sustenance and inspiration and illumination from it in a way that maybe some people do from sports or athletics, which I don't, or technology, or raising a family or whatever. I mean, there's lots of things that people do which are, I think, equally important. There's people who, can gain all those same things from doing good works for the world, and that's really important too. So there are things that I just think the world would be a poorer place, and I think it's kind of evident, when you have when there's a society or periods of time in which there's not as much art, it's not a pretty picture.
Right. Yeah. I think it's interesting. I ask everyone that question and like how differently people respond to it. So, where can people find you and your work?
Well, right now, I'm writing things, but there's nothing that's going to be produced anytime soon. I have plays, I'm sending them out, waiting to hear back. I have screenplays, I'm trying to figure out how to make them myself, or I have a feature-length screenplay that I'm trying to figure out how to market that or find an agent for it. The Essential Theater, which I'm not directing something for the festival this year. I just didn't feel as though I was the right director for either of those two plays, so I'll be producing it. But that's still something that I'm very much involved with, and that'll be happening in November. I think I know the dates, but I don't want to say it until they're formally set. But as I say, you can go to either the Essential Theater Facebook page or to www.essentialtheater.com to keep up with that. But that'll be happening. We are currently, looking at plays to consider to do for 2022. And the submission deadline for the following year will be April 23rd of 2022. So anyway, those are all things that are coming up, but I don't have anything that anybody can go see anytime soon. That's one of the things about being a writer for theater or film. It's you do the writing part, and then it could be a while before something else happens. Yeah.
Well, and everybody's just kind of like getting back into the theater right now. So I feel like it's definitely going to be probably a while before a lot of things happen, because I feel like a lot of people have, catching up to do, and probably shows they were going to do last year, and Okay, well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. That was great. That was really a lot of fun.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I enjoyed it too.
I really enjoyed talking to Peter, and I hope you found it helpful as well. Coming up in the next episode, I'm going to be chatting with writer Aaron Huck. Aaron is another writer I met in writing courses with Carrie Jones, and he's really talented, so I'm excited to talk to them. Aaron uses both he and they pronouns. So tune in for that. Isn't it great how we still say tune in, even though that doesn't really apply to podcasts? So click play on Spotify for that episode. Make sure you download that one. Connect your phone to your Bluetooth speaker for that episode. Anyway, thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for listening to the Find Creative Expression podcast. Please leave the podcast a review on your favorite podcast platform so that other people can find us as well. Thanks so much for supporting the podcast, supporting indie artists, and I'll see you in 2 weeks for the next episode.